My name is Sarah Ross. I'm a physiotherapist and international classifier for Paraworld Sailing. This is a recording of the presentation given at the IPC VISTA Conference on the research titled Evidence-Based Classification, Testing a Performance Indicator for Paraworld Sailing. If you had seen these athletes lined up on the athletics track in the stadium in Rio, ready to race each other, you would be justified in wondering if the classifiers had in fact fallen asleep on the job. But these were the 16 athletes that were on the start line at the Rio 2016 Paralympics, not running, but sailing in the 2.4 metre boat class. We had male and female athletes with disabilities including polio, cerebral palsy, below elbow amputations, above knee amputations, complete and incomplete paraplegia with T4 at the highest level, spinal fusion and hand dysplasias. So our question was the racing in Rio fair between these athletes with such a diverse range of disabilities? The IPC states that individual sports should have classification systems which are evidence-based and focus on the relationship between impairment and key performance determinants. In sailing, the athlete classification for the 2.4 metre boat class is minimum disability, so all sailors with an eligible disability race together. This research was carried out to focus on the performance outcomes of the 2.4 metre sailors in relation to their impairment, specifically focusing on trunk control. To give you some background to the sailing classification system, in the Rio 2016 Paralympics, 3 boat classes competed: the single-person 2.4 metre, the 2-person Scud 18 and the 3-person sonar. The method of classification is specific to each boat class and based on the functional skills required in sailing, such as ability to handle the ropes, steering, moving across the boat, and hiking or leaning body weight outside the boat. Other than the special cases such as benchmark disabilities and the visually impaired, the tests used are the functional anatomical test, where dependent on the athlete's functional limitations, range of movement, coordination or muscle strength are scored, the functional dock test, where the sailing-specific skills are tested on the boat at the dock, then finally the functional sail test, where the athletes are watched sailing under race conditions. On the Scud and the sonar, athletes are rated from class FCS1, the most severely disabled, to FCS7, and different combinations of these points are allowed. However, for the 2.4 metre, which is the class we are focusing on, the athlete only has to meet requirements of minimum disability, the maximum of 320 from 330 points on the functional anatomical test. The reason why this developed was due to the design of the 2.4 metre compensating for many of the differences in functional ability, which I'll explain further. When a spectator views the 2.4 metre start line, the boats look evenly matched. The hulls of the boat are one design, and although the sail materials can vary, their size and shape are measured within strict guidelines, which are rechecked at every major event. So it now looks more like a level playing field. I want to show you a short video of the 2.4 metre, which was put together by World Sailing, which will give a better understanding of the boat we are looking at. The 2.4 metre is a single-person boat, where the sailor sits inside a cockpit, often just on a mat on the floor of the boat, with a simple backrest. The boat has 2 sails and is steered by hand or foot controls. There is a bar in front of the sailor which holds around 16 ropes to adjust, and these are pulled in by hand, elbow, or in some cases, by teeth. The sailors start together on the start line, then sail a course upwind towards the direction of the wind, turn around a floating mark, then head downwind or away from the wind. The course is usually 3 laps before heading across the finish line. Each race takes around 40 minutes. Even though the cockpit is small, the sailors can shift their weight to assist counteracting the lean or heel of the boat when the boat is heading upwind. The 2.4 metre race course is set with the top mark directly upwind or into the wind from the start line. However, sailing boats cannot sail directly into the wind and need an angle of around 45 degrees to allow the sails to work, so the actual course sailed is more like this. Sailors need to find their own most efficient path to the upwind mark. So our first hypothesis was that the sailors who spent the least proportion of time sailing upwind versus downwind would be a predictor of the race winner. When the 2.4 metres sails upwind, the strength of the wind will tend to push the boat sideways as well as forward. In higher winds, the boat will lean or heel over, and at greater than 30 degrees of heeling, as shown in the middle picture, this slows the boat down. In the able-bodied Olympic laser class, shown on the right, sailors use their body weight to keep the boat flatter by leaning out of the side of the boat going upwind. The 2.4 metre has a heavy keel under the water to help stabilise the boat and counteract the heeling forces, but sailors still need to shift their body weight to maintain optimum angle and speed. Our second hypothesis was that sailors lacking full trunk control would be disadvantaged due to difficulties keeping weight to the high side of the boat when leaning upwind. Each boat competing at the Rio Games had an electronic tracker attached which recorded timings off the start line and around each upwind and downwind mark to the finish line. Using these tracker timings from the 11 competition races, we analysed the 916 mark roundings. Sailors were allocated to the partial trunk control group if they had not scored maximum points for trunk muscle function in their functional anatomical test. Upwind times were compared to downwind times to create a performance fraction for each sailor. The fractions were compared for the group of 4 sailors with partial trunk control, who had completed 226 mark roundings, versus the 12 sailors with full trunk control, who had completed 690 mark roundings. For our first hypothesis, we took the winner of each race and compared their upwind proportion to the rest of the athletes. In 9 out of the 11 races, the sailor with the lowest upwind proportion finished either first or second, which for this data set established a relationship between the upwind versus downwind proportion and winning. For the second hypothesis, mean values for upwind proportion in the partial trunk control group, shown in green, were compared to those in the full trunk control group, shown in blue. The 11 races have been ordered from lower wind on the left to higher wind on the right. It was expected that the partial trunk control group would show an increasing proportion of time sailing upwind relative to the full trunk control group as the wind strength increased. However, as you can see, this was not the case. In fact, in only one of the races, which is shown highlighted, were athletes with partial trunk control spending a slightly greater proportion of the race sailing upwind. Chi-squared analysis showed no significant difference between upwind versus downwind for any of the 11 races. Overall, the mean upwind proportions were actually less for the partial trunk control group compared to full trunk control, with no significant difference, thus disproving our assumption in the 2.4 metre. A previous study by Wilson and Vardy in 2005, after the Athens Paralympics, had suggested that decreased trunk control was a performance limiting factor in heavy winds. This study contradicts that previous suggestion. This may be due to the increasing level of skill in the 2.4 metre fleet, combining with sailors developing bracing methods upwind, which requires further research. We have developed a sport-specific measure with regards to trunk control to ensure we maintain a level playing field. This is important when a 2.4 metre athlete with complete paraplegia lines up to race their competitor with, say, a below elbow amputation, They know the race will not be decided on their level of trunk control. We need further research to include other impairments such as hand function. We now have a performance measure with a database of 916 mark roundings in Paralympic competition for future comparison and is a target for new sailors to train. With the growth in importance and value of Paralympic medals, the risks with a blanket minimum disability classification is that it may be perceived that countries should select their least disabled athletes to improve medal chances. It is vital we expand on this research so coaches and sailors can be confident the best sailor in the 2.4 metre fleet will win, regardless of their disability. Sailing has not been included as a sport in Tokyo, but as we work towards reinstatement into the Paralympic Games, further research will continue compliance with the IPC classification code. In conclusion, for this group of elite Paralympic 2.4 metre athletes, there was no evidence to support the hypothesis that trunk control is a factor in increased upwind proportion. From these results, we can conclude that with regards to trunk control, the minimum disability classification in the 2.4 metre is fair. The Rio podium tells the story. Sailing is unique in enabling athletes with such a wide range of disabilities to directly compete. Sailors talk about a sport where you really can leave your disability at the dock. Thank you for listening.